Where is it? This screen. Okay, hi. Welcome back. Last time, also 2 days ago, I did a stream on TypeScript. Today I want to try something else where we want to look at Remix. I have a query set up in my tweet deck that shows me everything that's going on, that's interesting to relevant to me. And as one of those, I am tracking everything that relates to Next.js shows up. And this week, Remix was mentioned all the time. It's a React framework. It's similar to Next.js, and it's not super new, but it's been around for a while. But they are gathering some steam. They're gathering some interest from people. And while I don't want to jump ship, I'm all in favor of sticking to the technology that you know and that works for you. I want to see what Remix is about, because they tout that they base everything that they do on web fundamentals. Something that they claim Next doesn't do as much or as well. And I want to see what that means and what that looks like. We're going to look at what Remix presents themselves as, and then we are today just going to follow the basic tutorial that they have, a quick start guide, to see how we would create a basic application in Remix. And along the way, I can draw some comparisons, some parallels to how we would do the same in Next.js. And what we see here is the website of a Remix. And they have a full example over here of a component of a projects page. Just want to make sure that, yeah, the microphone is working because I had it set to muted earlier. And so far, this will make sense by the time we're done today. They have what looks familiar from other frameworks, from Next in particular, a projects component, probably a projects page that returns some JSX, some React code, and they iterate, they map over a few projects and link to them, and they have a forms. I had a quick look at this earlier. Forms are super interesting, the way they handle them in Remix here. They also have a way to get projects in here and have a way to react to that form being submitted, all in the same file, which is the first major difference that we see to Next.js, where to submit any kind of data, we'd have an API route and we'd post something to that. We'd maybe use an Axios even to get the data into our Next.js applications. We have the get static props or the get server-side props, whereas everything here seems to be contained just in this one file. The marketing page itself is pretty Apple-y. They have, and it's a bit on the nose. So Remix is created by people that are opinionated, which is not necessarily just a bad thing. They have their opinions on how the web should be built, which isn't what they see in others. And some of what they write here is maybe a bit finger pointy without really saying it, but what they promise is worth it. It's definitely interesting. One of the features that they have that isn't in Next.js is something that was in React Router as well. So Remix is partly created by the team that also gave us React Router, which is nested routes. If we look at this page here, they have an admin overview, admin interface most likely, where we see a dashboard, account, sales, expenses. And if we select something in this navigation, we see something pop up on the right-hand panel, which has another navigation. And assuming that if we click on any of these here, something else would render in this area down here. What we see, we're on the invoices pages. These seem to be invoices, and selecting one of those gives us something in this panel over here. So a lot of stuff that doesn't change, but it changes the further you go into this page. And with nested routes, we see we are on example.com/sales/invoices/10/2000, which is one of these invoices. And if we now scroll down, this is a super cool effect. Gotta hand it to them there. If we scroll down, we see the entire page is the main application, is example.com. But then when we go further, /sales, is automatically everything in this panel over here. And then /invoices, we see this is the navigation that belongs to the sales page, and everything in this now yellow area is part of the invoices sub route, kind of. And then when we scroll further, we have one more part to this URL. We have the 10-2000, and that is its own component over here. And what they promise, I think that's on the same page. This shows us how this is connected to components. So there's a sales component, which is this green block, the yellow invoices component, and then the red invoice component. And they say that makes loading super fast and gets rid of the spinners that we usually see. They compare it here on this timeline. On the left, we have the same application without Remix. On the right, we have it with Remix. So if we see here, as time passes, we see a loader first on the left-hand side, and boom, everything is there on the Remix version. And now we see, because these components are nested, we have to load them one by one. We first see the sales page, we see the navigation over here. Then we can load what's in here. Then we get the navigation for that. Then we can load what's in here, and then we know what invoice we're on, and we can show that. Whereas in the Remix version, that all happened all at once. Yeah, it's cute. The Spinageddon, they say, with resolved is removed with their nested routes. We're gonna see that in action in a bit also. We're not gonna go through all of these points here. They show us how forms, they show us how forms are submitted. So in any application that we have, in any React application, if we want to create something, a new object, we have input fields, and then we have a form that we have hooked up to an action with an on click on a button or an on submit action. And whenever an input field changes, we need to update that input field with an on change handler. Now look at this component on this this form component here on the right. This uses a Remix own form component with a post method on it, and then we have input fields of type text that have a name, and we have a submit button, and that is the entire form. There is no on change, there is no on click, there is no on submit here, because what Remix does is it combines, that's what we saw in this very first example on this page, it combines client-side and server-side code in the same file. Because what they have here in this very same JS TypeScript file doesn't really, we're going to do TypeScript later, but it doesn't really make a difference. They also have they export a function called action, and that action will automatically, when we submit this form in this component file, automatically receive the request and will automatically extract the form data from the form that is part of this request. And this form data, so request.form data gives us everything that's on the form, has something on it called company, has something on it called amount. We don't need to read that from any state. We don't need to pass that through any state. It just happens because that is, and where is it? Where is it? HTML forms. Who knew? That's the entire magic. There is nothing React that we need to put on there. There's no use state hook. There is no there's no use effect hook on anything. It's just an HTML form, and then the backend portion of this component of this page takes care of the rest. That's very nice. Then they say they handle error states as well. So if a subcomponent doesn't load, then only that breaks. That's something actually that I ran into on Tuesday when I didn't know how to handle things going wrong, and they have that built in here, so that might be worth looking at. Okay, and that's it. What we're going to do now is we are going to follow their quick start guide. It's a walkthrough that they show us how to build a basic blog. I'm going to try to walk through this relatively quickly and again point out how this compares to Next.js along the way, or just other just non-Remix JavaScript React code. They have a CLI called create remix. We know the create React app, we know create next, they have their own create remix, and we are going to jump into the terminal. Let me put the terminal on the right side here, and you can go away. And I am going to follow this, and I'm going to comment it as we go. npx create. No, let's first go to a projects directory. We're going to do npx, so we don't have to install it locally first. Create remix at latest, so give me the latest version of the CLI. Is it okay to install this package? Yes, of course. That's why I called it. Ooh, this is trippy because it's animated and okay, no longer. Where would you like to create your app? We would like to, let's call it the remix quickstart in this directory, and it's now going to ask us a few things. Where do we want to deploy? And on the Syntax FM episode on this, they said that you have to choose that correctly from the beginning, because changing the deploy target is a bit of manual work. What they do, if we select we want to deploy this to Netlify or to Vercel now, they give us the configuration for that, and exchanging that for something else, not as easy at the moment. We can do that manually later, so this isn't set in stone. It's just a bit of a hassle to replace that. And they give us a few options here. You could run this on your own. You could run an Express server for the tutorial to work. They want us to go with their own remix app server. Gonna do that. Would you like to do TypeScript or JavaScript? The TypeScript that they do here and also do as part of the tutorial is very nice. So we're gonna do TypeScript, and we want them to run npm install for us at the same time as well, because that'd be the first thing that we would do anyways. And while that loads, let's open another terminal, projects, and I call it remix quickstart. And then we can run npm run dev. Once this is complete, I'm gonna have the server run here. And let's actually exit full screen mode, because now I want to put those all side by side. It's a bit, sorry, a bit cramped on this display. We can make it work. And on another browser window. Okay, so it's done. We can go into the remix quickstart and we can run npm run dev, and the server is running. We can go to localhost 3000. 3006 is a different project for me. No, 3003 also not it. 3000, and there it is. There is the default application that we just installed. It's a few links to their documentation just out of there. We could look at the code that they have. Sure, let's do that. But this is nothing to write home about yet, but we're gonna change that code in a second. If we poked around, and you know what, to keep this easier, let's go into VS Code, because we'll run into TypeScript errors in a bit anyways. What we see here is they have, yeah, no thank you. They have some configuration, so it comes with a tsconfig pre-configured. They have a readme, they have a package JSON with a few scripts. We are going to do the dev here. We're not going to deploy in as part of this stream today, but we see they are using their own remix run React. We have remix run dev. That's probably the script. A few types. Nothing super out of the ordinary. What else? We have a public directory where the build files are going to end up in. So this is not something we are ever going to touch. The build directory will be something that we want to deploy when we deploy this to our own hardware later. We have the node modules. We have build, which I have not looked at yet. This looks this is auto-generated. So I think when we deploy, we want to deploy the build directory and the public build directory. I thought that was part of the script that I saw. Cache we don't care about. What we are going to focus on mostly is the app directory. The app directory has an entry for the client and an entry for the server, because Remix is kind of both. It's not like Next, where it's not Remix is not server-side generated. It doesn't compile a list of static files, but it does those on the fly still with the back and forth. The server prepares it and then it's hydrated on the client with each request. So we don't have to wait for the entire, let's say we have a site that has hundreds or thousands of pages. To deploy a Remix application, we don't need to wait for the build process to be done with all of those, to have prepared these hundreds and thousands of static HTML files. We just can quickly push it, and then the speed, they say, will be comparable, but that is, and I saw some voices on Twitter on that, when running on a Redis cache or when running on the Cloudflare. For the purpose of this, we want to explore where the differences in building are. We're not going to care too much about if those claims are correct and in what context those claims are correct. We have a root file which looks a lot like what we have in like the _app.js or the _document.js in Next, a template that goes around everything else. But what is interesting is all of these Remix components. We have links, we have live reload, we have meta, outlet, scripts, scroll restoration. I haven't looked at all of these, but outlet you can think of as a slot. This is where a component or a page will go. When we have these nested routes that we saw earlier, every nested piece of content goes into an outlet, and you can put different kinds of things, slot different kinds of things into those outlets, which is super. I don't know why the term I know for them is slots, but outlet is the same concept. You give it a blank area, blank space, and you can put anything in there. How they handle meta tags, that's something that I did on stream a week ago, that I did last Thursday when we did the open graph tags. The way they handle the meta tags, like the title and the description and the OG image and the OG URL, there is in this default function app, in what they return from this root TSX file, just a meta component. And a lot in Remix works by convention. If you're exporting a function called meta, which is of type meta function, this is where I said that the TypeScript types that they have are quite neat. That returns an object, which is a map of this is the type of meta tag, and this is the value, and they build that from that. Links similarly is where all the, like, if we have a link in the head of the page, so not a hypertext link, but a link to a style sheet, or a link to a, I don't know, do we link to the robots.txt in there? To the fav icon, I think, is a link. That will automatically end up there because there is this links component here. Similarly for the scripts, that's what we can, that's a location that we can use to have scripts end up there for a tracking, for an analytics script. Most action happens inside of this routes component, this routes directory, which currently contains only an index.tsx file, and if we look at that, that looks familiar because it is exactly what we see down here. Welcome to Remix, and then a link to the 15-minute quick start blog tutorial and the deep dive jokes app tutorial. Cool. So this is where Next calls it the pages directory. What we have in here when we add a new route, either as a directory with an index.tsx file or as a new page, that's what will end up as a page. Everything happens inside of the app directory. We don't have Next. We have the components. We have the pages. We have like all of these top level directories. In Remix, all of that happens inside of app and is then nested however we need it in there. Let's continue though with the tutorial then, because we saw that if this is where the pages go. As part of this quick start guide, we're going to build a blog, and a blog has an overview of posts. We want to have an overview page for the posts, and they tell us to, in the app root tsx, let's replace all of this. Put it in the root tsx. Let's put it in the root tsx. Just anywhere here on top of the outlet. Sure, I don't think they want this to go into the root component, but we're gonna do what it says. And go to posts. I save, and I get an application error. Okay, of course, this is underlined in red because this doesn't have the link component. It has links here. We need to import the link, save it. Now I have to reload the page manually. This is where the posts are. Let's go here and we get a 404 page not found because there is no route that matches the /posts. We need that now. Yeah, we did that. And because we know for posts we want to have an overview and we want to have an individual page for each post, we're going to put them in a directory. So inside of the routes folder we are going to add the we are going to add the posts, and in here we're going to create a new file called index.tsx, make this a TypeScript JSX file, and this is the code that they want us to add here. Export default, so whatever the default export is will be the body of this page. Tells us here something, there's an unexpected server error because we made a GET request to this post, but this page, let's zoom in a bit. But this page, this component, did not provide a loader. We're not going to do a loader because this message also disappears when we have a default export in here. Function posts, and for now this is exactly what I'd do in Next as well. Let's do h1 posts. Now I have to reload manually. Hey, look at that. We now have a page that corresponds to /posts, and this post link up here, that is because it's in the routes, in the root TSX, and now we have posts here. We want to show some posts, and eventually we're gonna use markdown files. For now, we are going to hard code something here. We're not gonna write full proper articles, but we are going to use what's called a loader. So a loader also is, as we saw with the action earlier, is a function that needs to be called loader, and that will be, if it exists, with the use loader data hook, give us the data that was provided by we're going to see what that means. Give us the data that was provided by the loader. Let's first start export const loader. The loader needs to be a function. It needs to be called loader that returns some data. That is the data that we want to pass to this page. We can we can read it from somewhere else. We can request it from an API somewhere. We can read files from the file system, because this will happen server side, which is neat. Or we can hard code it here. Let's just go with what they did here. My first post with the title, also my first post, and let's create a second one because they have a second one here also. Slug the 90s mixtape, and the title, a mixtape I made just for you. Cool, the page automatically reloaded. That happened very quickly, but the posts don't show up anywhere yet. We will now want to make sure that what is loaded on the server gets passed to the page, and let's get rid of navigation here. For that, we can use the const posts, the use loader data hook. So if we use loader data, whatever this loader returns is returned by this hook. So posts will be exactly what the server returns here, and we can log them. Let's go console log posts. Now I have my server running in the background. We see the posts were logged to my running development server. But if we look at the console in the browser, they were also logged here. So the line between what is client-side code and what is server-side code is a bit blurry because it's kind of both, and that's what they describe here. It's a little wild how blurry the line is between the client and the reading the documentation to you now. Between the client and the server in a remix route. If you have your server and browser consoles both open, you'll note that they both logged our post data. That's because remix rendered on the server to send a full HTML document like a traditional web framework, but it also hydrated in the client and logged there too. So both of these happened. And now let's go back to the VS Code. We want to render links to those posts, or we want to render those posts, definitely. So that's as we do in any regular React component. We have posts and we want to map over them. We get a post, and for each post we are going to render a li. We need the key. This is nothing special. This is exactly what we do always. Post.slug, and in here that's a different treatment of links. Here we now want to link to the post.slug, which is 90s mixtape or my first post. It's not /postslug, it's not /post/slug. You'll figure that out for us. But also a difference to Next.js is that in Next we would have to put an empty a tag in here, because the link component in there is a wrapper that does some other magic. It's not a huge major difference, right? But it's a difference between those two. Post.title went back a little too far, and it complains because it can't find the link. Let's import the link from Remix. So whereas a lot of things are next/head or next/link, everything here just comes from the Remix package. They imported that here as well. And this is not valid markup. Let's put it in an unordered list. Up here and up here. Let's reload, and we see the posts. We have links to these two now, and if I click on them, nothing's going to happen. But if we look at the URL, without us having to say this is /posts/slug, it automatically figured out if you're on /posts and you link to 90s mixtape, you want to go to /posts/90s mixtape. I assume that, like, I have spent very little time with Remix, but I assume that is how it works. We don't have a page for that yet. Before we do that, we have TypeScript, which is mad at us here because there is an implicit any. It doesn't know what a post is. It can look at this stuff up here, but how would it know that there is a connection between those? So from this page, let's export a type. Well, we wouldn't need to export it really, but we're gonna need that in a second. The slug is a string, and the title also is a string. And then it's enough to, here where we have the loader, instead of returning it, we are going to assign that to a variable first. Posts is of type post array. And then afterwards we're going to return the posts, and that is 1. Also for the use loader data, we are going to say the loader data is an array of posts, and TypeScript no longer complains. So I prefer this documentation over what they did in Next, because in Next they have a lot of documentation, they have a lot of examples, Next has tons and hundreds of examples. But I like that they just walk you through this already. They have TypeScript in their demo, in their tutorial, and they show you this is where you want to put that in, and that is why that makes sense. For TypeScript newbie, as myself, like I struggled with that 2 days ago, this is very helpful and easier to get into than being confronted with all these massive warnings that we saw. Now, having all this data, we eventually want to read the data from somewhere else. Could be a CMS, could be a Sanity, could be a Contentful. We want to put that somewhere else. We don't want to have that happen on the same file. To make it all a bit neater, they recommend that we put it in a file in app, new file, post.ts. There is no nesting here in a lib, in an API directory. We could do that. It's not necessary at this point because this is a super tiny project, but we could. In here, we are just going to move over what we have here. So the type now is going to be defined in this helper file. This is where we're going to keep the get posts, and we're even going to use this to create posts. So we're going to define our API in this. And we are going to move what happens inside of the loader, this entire thing, to an export function get posts. Just everything like this. And now we need to make sure that we can use that over here. Import get posts from, and they do a, let's look at the TS config, so we don't get confused by what they are going to do next. They have a paths alias in their TypeScript configuration setup already. So anything that's prefixed with a tilde, they will replace with /app. So instead of us having to go up a few directories from every file and then say you go to app/routes or whatever, we can say give me tilde/ and that will always be the app directory no matter how deep in the project we are. So if you want to get this this post.ts file that we had earlier, I can just go tilde/post, and I can also import the type that was called post from the same file. And in the loader we can then return get posts. Same code, doesn't do anything different, it just is a bit neater, and we are going to extend the post.ts file in a bit. Pulling from a data source. Now we are going to get actual files to read. And before moving to any kind of CMS, TypeScript works, Markdown I mean, works really well as plain text files. So in here, on the same level as the app directory, right? In the root of the project, not in the app directory, but next to it, we are going to create a new folder, and we're going to call it posts. In my project, I like to prefix this with an underscore, just so I know, underscore posts, underscore pages, underscore tips, underscore articles. That is all my content, but we can just call it posts here. And in here we are going to create two markdown files that represent the two posts that we have created. So my -first -post.md, and I'm going to copy what they have in here. It's the same code. Actually, let's not copy it exactly. So this will be a markdown file. Markdown files begin with front meta, so 3 dashes, then a key value, a list of key value entries that have attributes in them. And the second post is the 90s mixtape.md. Can copy the code from here. Oh, nice. Thank you. Didn't know they had a copy feature, but that is convenient. And now we have the files here, but nothing knows about them yet. We have to go back into, we first need something that can read the markdown files. So they recommend, we're just going to blindly do what they do in the tutorial here. npm add front meta to read the front meta from these otherwise regular text files. Cool, installed front meta. Now in the post TS, which is where our helper files to read posts live, we are going to import path from path. So the regular path module of Node and the regular import, well, not the regular, but the fs module from fs promises. So the promisified version, the promise version of the file system module in Node. We are server-side now, so we can do server-side stuff now. This doesn't happen in the browser. And we are going to import parse front meta from front meta. And because we are going to read from the posts directory a few times, let's define a posts path just outside of all the helper functions. Path.join. We always use __ dir name for the name of the directory. That's important also if you want to deploy that somewhere. And then tell it to go up to one directory. So out of the dir name is the... Oh, right. And that's important. It's relative to the server output, not the source. So wherever this code is going to end up. And that, I assume, will be in the build directory, probably. So from the build directory, we want to go up a level. So we're in the root of the project, and we want to go down into posts. Pretty sure. I assume. I don't know. I assume that's the build directory here. And then inside get posts, we no longer want to hard code the posts because we have the cool fancy files now. Now what we are going to just copy that. What they do, we can look at everything in here. So we are first going to read everything that is in this directory, so in this post directory. And then for all the files in here, we are going to read every file with the fs with a file system read file. Give me the posts, and we're going to look at the file name, so give me posts 90s mixtape.md. Read that, and then with the helper function from this front matter library, we are going to get the attributes, and the attributes will contain the title. So everything that we put in here, the title, any description, would be parsed into attributes, and we pass. So this file can, this function can do its thing. We're going to pass the whole file as its toString version. The slug was hard-coded before. Now we're going to take the file name, so 90s-mixtape.md, and we're going to cut the .md off of the end, so we get just 90s mixtape and my first post, and attributes.title. Now object is of type unknown. That is going to come up in the tutorial in a second. This isn't a again reading from the tutorial. This isn't a Node file system tutorial, so you'll just have to trust us on that code. Well, it doesn't do anything insane. We kind of saw what it did. As mentioned before, you could pull this markdown from a database somewhere, which we will show you in a later tutorial. So we could update that, of course. If you didn't use, and this is why they wanted us to use the Remix app server in the beginning. If we didn't use the Remix app server, maybe the build output will look differently. You might probably need to add an extra 2 periods up here, so we go up another directory. And note that this demo at least has to be deployed somewhere that has a persistent file system. So if you reboot it, files are still there. Doesn't really. When we're working locally, we can safely ignore that. And now, since we're reading a file, the type system has no idea what's in there, so we need a runtime check. For that, we'll want an invariant method to make runtime checks like this easy. So an invariant is like a guard that makes sure that what we expect is there. We are going to add npm add tiny invariant, and we are going to import it in here. Import invariant from tiny invariant. We don't need to know how it does what it does, but we're going to see in a second because it's pretty neat. It's going to be a bit neater in a later part even. We had it complain about the attributes here, so let's add another type at the same time. Export type post markdown attributes. So what attributes are on a post? It's a title, and a title is a string. And here we are also going to add then a little helper function. Function is valid post attributes. This function will check, does this file that we're passing, do these attributes that we're passing to it match what we're expecting? And this will accept attributes, any. It's okay to use the explicit any here, I assume. because there might not be any front meta. We don't know what form the front meta, if any, has. And it is going to... Now here I'm going to trust what they are doing because I'm not deep enough into my TypeScript yet. Attributes is post markdown attributes. So I assume whatever this returns will be post markdown attributes. Why are you complaining though? A function whose declared type is neither void nor any must return a value. Okay, the function is still empty. Let's return attributes. Title. I don't know how it does what it does. I'm gonna trust that. I haven't checked out the invariant, but in using it, right after we read, and let's hide the terminal while we don't need it. After we read the front meta and we get attributes, we want to add this little invariant here. Invariant, and we are going to pass a helper function is valid post attributes. Just give it all the attributes, and if that fails, it will show us this warning. File name has bad metadata! Exclamation mark. What did I mess up here though? What did I mess up here though? Why is that? Unreachable code. Where did I not close something? Where did I not close something? Huh. Where did that go? And now the get posts needs to be asynchronous. Ah, right. That always needed to be asynchronous when we moved to reading from the file system. I forgot to add that earlier. Now let's see if the posts overview still works. Let's reload it. We have 90s mixtape and we have my first post. On 90s mixtape is so cool. Let's change the title in here. Reload the page. It doesn't reload automatically when we change something outside of the app directory. Maybe that, or if we change markdown files, maybe it only reloads on TypeScript and JavaScript files. Who knows really? So if I reload, that happens. So we know this is connected now. This is no longer reading the hard-coded post from anywhere. This is now what is in these files. But when we now have two posts on here, slash with the slugs 90s mixtape and my first post, if we click on them, we saw that it does do, we saw that earlier, we saw that it does do the correct URL, but there's nothing in there yet because we don't have a page for that. And we could either hard code a component like this posts index page here for every possible slug, but that wouldn't be very fun. We don't want to now have to create a 90s mixtape.tsx and a myfirstpost.tsx with exactly the same code. That'd be insane. So we are going to do the same as they do in Next.js, where we have a dynamic part of the URL. If we name the file not index.tsx, but new file $slug.tsx, then this will pass the slug to the component here. Another slight difference to how we do it in Next.js. In just the syntax in Next.js, this slug, this placeholder would be in square brackets. Here it's $slug. It's not treated any differently afterwards. Export default function post slug. I assume what this function is called doesn't really make a difference. I don't think this is magic that needs to be connected exactly like that, particularly since this is the default export and they're probably going to use the default export without caring about the name. Return a div with h1, just some post in here, because we haven't connected this to the slug and we haven't read the post that belongs to that slug. Let's reload, and it is now some post, but if I go to my first post, it's the same, right? This is hard-coded. This isn't the actual titles from these posts. We also want to load data on this post page now. We want to have it not just show us some post, And for that, we again need an export const a function called loader async, and that's something that we didn't have before, which now receives params. So parameters, which is the URL parameters. The $slug will be in this params. Return params.slug. This will then make the slug available to the post slug component. So const slug equals, and we had the use loader data hook before. Just to make sure that this works, we are going to put the slug here. On this page, when we go to the URL /90s mixtape, we see this is the slug of this page. And if we go to my first post, this is the slug of that page. So again, super neat with the function called loader and the use loader data without having to pass props into that. It is available to the component. So in Next, the way we would do that, of course, is with the use static props or use server-side props, where it's in the name already. The function returns something which is then passed to the component using props properties. But having just the slug alone isn't very helpful, because we want to read the full proper post on this. Alright, TypeScript. Okay, let's first get to that. It is complaining about some TypeScript stuff. We had that earlier in the root. Was it the root? The root TSX, where they have this meta function works exactly like the loader function. It has to be there, it has to be called that and return something, and that then is passed down in here to this meta component. And they had that typed to meta function. Same happens with the loader, which we can type as a loader function from Remix. Nope, not like that. I want you to import this as the import type loader function from Remix. Again, everything is directly from Remix. It's not from remix/loader. Just the Remix package. We want to read the full post now using the slug that we get here. So we're not gonna pass the slug to the page, but we're gonna use the slug to get the full post. We already have a get posts, plural, but we don't want to get all of them and then have to filter. We want to have a function that gets us just this one post. Export async function get post, and we are going to pass a slug to this, which is a string. What are you? Okay, you're no longer complaining. We're going to do the same. We're going to just copy this in here. Oh, that's duplicated now. It does something very similar to the function that gets us all the posts. Here we still use the posts path, so the posts directory, the posts folder, and we say the next element, give me slug.md, whatever 90s mixtape.md is, read that file. Read that file, get me the attributes from that file by parsing the front meta. Check if it has all the post attributes, check if it has the title. If it doesn't, throw an error. Otherwise, return the post. Give me the full post. Here we returned a list of posts. Unreachable code detected. What? Ah, of course. I didn't need that at all because we're returning this here. Give me not a list of posts, give me just this one object representing this post, consisting of the slug and the title. We don't have the content in here yet, which is fine. So on the slug TSX, instead of passing the slug, we want to import the get post from the tilde post helper function. I'm not sure exactly what to call that library API function. And we also in here want to use import invariant from the tiny invariant. So because part of this also, the loader function still happens server side. As part of that, we want to make sure invariant params.slug, does it have the slug? Otherwise, we say expected params.slug. If it does have a slug, so if this invariant catches that there is no slug, it won't continue. So if we get to after this line, there will be a slug. Let's get the post that matches that slug. We no longer get a slug in the component, we now get a full post. We don't have to, but we will in a second. We don't have to specify in here, in the use loader data, give me like a post, give me this kind of property. It will just give us whatever the loader function returns. Instead of hard coding the title as some post, we can say post.title, and the slug is now also part of the post as post.slug. This has an error, objects are not valid as React child. Let's see, yeah, okay, that works though. Now on the page we get, so the loader function returns the post, and we get it with the use loader data hook, and we can show it on the page. If we go back to posts and go to my first post, it now says my first post instead of some post. That's good, we're going in the right direction. We're missing the body of the file. So like we took our time, we wrote the full proper blog post, but where is it? Just having a title on there, even though it looks like many posts, many blogs out there, isn't super exciting. So we are going to install. There's a bunch of plugins that we could use. There's Remark, there's Rehype, which uses Remark. I think it's that way around. But we are in this going to use marked. And because we use TypeScript in here, types mark. We're going to install, we're going to npm add marked and add types / marked. In our post TSS, TS file, not TSS, in post TS file, we now need the import marked from marked and the parse front meta. We destructured that. This install is done. There you go. So we load posts in two places, in the get post and get posts singular and plural. We don't really need the full body of the posts in the post overview. Usually if you want to have a teaser in there, you have that in the front meta. You have a description, or you have not a teaser, an excerpt is what it's called in WordPress, I think. So that's what I stuck with usually. But we don't need the full body of the blog post unless we want to show it in the overview as well. So we are only going to read the markdown content in the get post singular version. Here where we parse the front meta, that returns the attributes. We destructured the attributes out of what it returns. We now also want the body. And after we don't need to check if it has a body. If it doesn't have a body, it will be empty. The HTML it generates, mark generates, will be empty. That's fine. We can get the const HTML with marked body. And we also need to return it with the slug and the title. Let's put those on separate lines. HTML slug title. So a post that is returned by the getPost function gives us HTML slug and title. Easy as that. Save it, and on the $slug.tsx file where we read our post, we don't need to change anything about the loader because it's still, the function takes care of giving us the markdown, the parsed markdown content. In here, rendering the slug, not super interesting. We just needed to have that there to make sure that everything is hooked up correctly. We can now dangerously set inner HTML. It's fine in this case to use dangerously set inner HTML because we have full control over the body of the post. We're not going to put anything nasty in there. Usually you don't want to use that for user-generated content you have no control over. In this scenario, perfectly fine. And we are going to render the post HTML. My first post has "Isn't it great?" Where did that just suddenly come from? If we look at the post in here, the markdown content, "Isn't it great?" It sure is. You have to reload that because that doesn't happen automatically. So this is hooked up, and if we look at the 90s mixtape, it has a full list. So this is now the HTML something that the marked package function took the markdown content of this text file, gave us the HTML version, and we put it on the page. That's pretty sweet. On with the tutorial. Now we have reading. We have reading the posts. We don't have writing new posts yet. We also want to add an admin interface that we can create new posts with, and that's where now the nested routes are about to come in. In the routes directory, we are going to add an admin.tsx. It's going to be on the same level as the posts directory, and we don't need to copy that. Let's write it out. Import. Let's not write it out. That is boring. But we're going to walk through it in a second. So we want to import the link component, and we want to import use loader data because we will, in a second, read all the posts, put them on the page, and link to them. Have something happen to them. And the component itself is called, like, we use the get post function that we have already, and we use the post type that we have already. Export const loader. This isn't defined as being a loader function here. We could, as long as nothing complains. We don't need to. In here, in our component, we use the use loader data again. Tell it, hey, this is going to return an array of post objects. We are going to have, and this is what we're going to use for styling in a second, div class name admin. Have a nav on, so we're going to have exactly what we saw on the marketing page earlier. We're going to have a panel on the left hand side that lists all our posts, and when you click on a post, it is going to show up, like details of it are going to show up in a panel on the right hand side. For now, we are on here going to map over them, have an unordered list again, and link to, and now, because it's not just a child of the admin page, give it the full path. So /posts/post.slug with the post title. Yeah. And this admin page isn't linked from anywhere, so we need to manually navigate to it for now. Could put the link somewhere, but you don't usually want to link directly to your admin interface. This is what it looks like. It looks exactly like the post overview, right? You hardly saw anything change between this here and /admin. Looks very, very similar. We're gonna style it in 8-bit. Haven't done styles yet. So we are going to also put those in the app directory. Any app code, if it's not content, we're going to put in the app directory here. New folder. We could do, of course, we could do Tailwind, we could do Sass probably. We could do anything to that. For now, we're just gonna go ahead and keep this simple. A styles directory on the same level as the routes directory. And let's add an admin.css. Where we put it doesn't really make all that much of a difference. And we're gonna, this is not gonna set the world on fire. This is not super amazing styles, but it just is there to show us, hey, you can load CSS from somewhere. We don't need this everywhere. You see, most of it is scoped to the admin class, which is this div here on the admin component. So everything on admin is nested inside of the .admin class. Admin will be a flex container. The nav, which is the list of posts on the side here, will have a padding to the right. And then there will be a main section. So that right now is empty. That's where the 3 dots are. That will be spaced a bit and ems. This will be, I'm not sure if that will be global or if that will only work on this admin route, because we are going to load it on the admin page. We're going to import the admin styles. We're going to import them as, not just as give me the CSS, but we're going to put them into a, we're going to name the import from, and again, tilde styles / admin CSS. Now we have it somewhere. What can we do with it? We saw in the root TSX that it had this links component. And if we define an export const links function, again, it has to carry that name. And in it, we return an array of objects with a rel of, in this case, a style sheet and an href of the admin styles. So this basically is just the location of this style sheet. Put it here, and because this function is named that, we saw the page jump already. Like, this is now a flex container. This is the padding on the side. This is where the nav is. We could make this, we could style this more, but it's not the point of the exercise really. Each route, and it can be a nested route also, can export a links function that returns an array of link tags, except in object form instead of HTML. So we could do anything that goes into a link, put it in here, and it would automatically collect all of them. Here. This allows Remix to merge all of your rendered routes links together and render them in the links element at the top of your document. I need to check something real quick. Okay. Cool, and back already. Just want to make sure that everything is running smoothly still. And now we have a decent looking page. Now for the nested routes. We want this list over here to always be there. To have this be an overview, and if we click on one, we want it to show up over here. Right now they link to the original posts, but we want to see an edit interface on the right side here. And we want to be able to make adjustments on here. For it to have this cool feature that we saw on the marketing page, where it loads everything all at once and super performant, and gives us these pieces that slot into, even like every page has an outlet, and you can put something into that outlet further down the tree, we need what's called a nested route. We get nested routes by, on the routes we have the index TSX, the admin TSX. We now also want a folder called that, without the TSX of course. So we want a new folder called admin. We have now routes admin and routes posts next to admin and index, and inside of admin we're just gonna do that for now. We're gonna add an index.tsx. In here we're not gonna do anything too crazy. We're gonna import link from Remix, export default function admin index, and we are going to return a paragraph. Ooh, you are garbage. Link to, and we're gonna link to new, not Mew the Pokemon. create a new post. That's a bit of a teaser because we're going to do that. So we saw in the link tag, if we don't give it a /posts/slug/anything, it will take this new and it will append it to whatever page we are on. Okay, now we have that, but it's not showing up anywhere yet. It is now a nested index route. So we want to show up where it has these 3 dots right now. The way we do that is with an outlet, one of these slots that I described in the beginning. So we are going to import outlet from Remix, and on the admin page where it has the 3 dots now, we are going to use the outlet component. And nothing else. That's it, and it's hooked up already because of the magic of these conventions. That is all we need to do to now have this index show up. And if I hover over that icon, it's a bit tiny on the stream. This links to /admin/new. I won't touch it. 404 not found. We don't have a new page, but we can add one. Right? We saw that we have /admin, the index. That is just whatever shows up on the index of this. Now we also want /admin/ you're doing to me new.tsx. I'm gonna click it again. I get an application error, so something is now hooked up, but it's broken. Oh no, our table, it's broken. Default function new post. And this will not be a full standalone page, but it will be a sub page, a piece of a page that will show up in this outlet over there. Return, and we are just going to say new post. For now, reload it. Okay, now it says admin and new post here. That's not super exciting. But remember, this is /admin. And when I create a new post, this stuff over here, that didn't change at all. Only what's shown in this outlet changed from what I have on the index nested route to what I have on the new nested route. Automatically swap out the index route for the new route. That is super neat. Now we saw on the marketing page, they also had an action. They had a form. So now we want to create a form that does something. We can import form from Remix, which is their own form component. And instead of returning just new post here, we are going to return a form with a method of post. We don't have to specify any action. We don't have to specify an on submit. We don't have to specify an on click. We just say this is a form. And the rest of this I'm going to copy, because why would I not? Semantically, there's a bit that we could argue about here, but that's not the time and place. We have a few paragraph tags, 1, 2, 3, 4. The first one contains a label with an input field, and the next one contains a label with an input field. Both text fields, and they have a name. The first one's called title, the next one's called slug, and we have a label for a text area that is called markdown. Then we have a button type submit. Doesn't have an on-click handler. Let's reload, and we see a form appear. Nothing is hooked up to any hooks. There is no on change. There is no on submit. There is no on click, and that is pretty amazing. That's pretty cool, because this is now an HTML form that when we submit it will be sent to the server, to the backend. This is a full-on backend request. Let's add in our post TS. We had the get post. We had the get posts. Let's add an export async function create post, and we're going to pass a post to it. Now we want to create a file on the file system. If we create a new post, then this post has to become a TS file in this posts directory. It could be dangerous usually if we do this with user generated content where they could just put files on my file system. Is fine because this is a demo and we just want to see how it all works. Const md. So this will have to be a full regular markdown file, which means it starts with front matter. We have to hard code the line breaks as \n in here. Every markdown file needs to have a title, which will be the post.title, another line break, another 3 dashes, another line break, and then the post.markdown, whatever we put in this markdown field here. Post.markdown. This will be the body of the file. We can also await fs write file path.join the posts path, and then let's use a template string here, post.slug.md. And with the write file, of course, I also need to specify what to put in the file. I only gave it where to write the text. It's the text I wanted to write, and then I'm going to return get post. So I'm not going to return the file I created here, but I'm going to use the helper function that I created before, which is going to check for this invariant and everything. Get post for the post.slug. I duplicate all of that, and it complains that it doesn't know what a post is. I know that a post is a post, so that's probably what we want. Okay, if I just define it as a post, that won't work, because a post doesn't have any markdown on it. If I return a post, I don't expect it to have markdown, and I think they do that in a bit. So we're gonna undo that, and we're gonna do that correctly when they tell us to in the tutorial. Back on our new route, we also, so if you submit a post, if you submit a new post, we want to send you back to the overview. We don't want to keep you on this page, but we want to redirect you. And remember, part of what happens in this new TSX happens server side, and we can, from the server, redirect you to somewhere else. And we also need the import the create post helper from the tilde post. We saw the loader, we saw the links. We now have an export const action, and this action will receive whatever is submitted when this component's form is submitted. Async will receive a request. And this complains that this is never declared. As we saw with the loader type and the links type, we can import type that is the action function, not the meta function, not the loader function. Const action is an action function, and have that typed. Cool. Now, how do we get the data? Because we're not creating, as we would in Next.js, we're not creating an API endpoint that we pass stuff to in the JSON body. How does it do that? And we saw that on the marketing page. This is amazing. Const form data await request dot form data. That's it. Because there is, if a request comes in and a form was submitted as part of that request, it's automatically available on the request with this accessor function called form data. How do we now get values out of that? How do we get the title, the slug, and the markdown? Well, we'll check that out. Const title form data dot get the title. Const slug form data get the slug. Const markdown. This is almost boring, so it's so easy. Form data dot get markdown. And then we want to await create post with these three, so the title, the slug, and the markdown. If we are done, we want to redirect you to the regular /admin. So away from the new subroute to the admin index again. We don't need to change anything about the form because the form already has everything that we need. And keep in mind, we only need to specify the form. This is only what happens on the right side of our page here. We don't, for this new post subpage, we don't need to repeat that there is supposed to be this navigation on the left-hand side. We only ever need to care about when we want to appear in this outlet, in this panel, in this slot over here. Which makes those two very easy to connect. There is nothing else that this could refer to, because this action waits for this component's form to be submitted. And then we had this error here, this TypeScript error when we create a post. I'm not sure, I don't understand TypeScript well enough yet to see why we don't just adjust the post, but they create because everything can in theory be optional. No, can't. I don't know. I'm not gonna question it. We can define a new type that is a new post for a title, a slug, and a markdown, all of which will be strings. And here where we create the post, this receives a new post. And I think that's all that they need us to change here. That one with the action function we already did. Where I said this is of type action function, that stopped complaining. Not fully happy yet, because there could be errors. What if one of these isn't set? And it happens, Remix handles these errors pretty well. So if after we read them and one of those is missing, we want to show a warning on the form, hey, post title is mandatory, hey, post slug is mandatory, or is required, I think is the word we'd use. Let's create an object called errors. If there is no title in the errors object, just set errors.title to true. TypeScript's gonna complain, we're gonna fix that in a bit. If there is no slug, set errors.slug to true. Just have it be present. We don't need to set it to a string that describes the problem. Just have it be on there. Markdown errors.markdown equals true. Now if there are any errors, so if this object has any keys, like if none of these 3 lines happen, this will be an empty object. An object.keys errors will be 0. And if we do length here, that means it is at least 1. Any non-zero value will be true. Then we want to return this errors object. It won't even get to the part where it tries to create a post. And that also pretty clever. Notice we don't return a redirect this time, we actually return the errors. So we don't end up at the redirect, we don't leave this page. Instead we get this errors object. Same as we had the use loader data, there is also a hook called use action data. In this component now, we can get the errors from the action by calling use action data. And I'm gonna copy this in here because that's not super exciting to type. Let's actually take the full label. What we do here, instead of just printing post title colon, we also check, is there an errors object, and is title set on it. And it is either set to nothing, so it's undefined, or it's set to true if there is an error with the title. If there is an error with the title, we show an M that says, an M tag that says title is required, and the same for the slug down here, and also for the markdown field. The line break tag in here that makes the hair in the back of my neck stand up, but this is not about semantics in this. This is not what we're looking at today. And this is not defined yet. On this route, we don't know what errors is, so we don't need to export it, but type post error can be title, can have a title, which if it exists is a boolean, can have a slug, which if it exists is a boolean, and can have markdown, so all of these three are optional, which also would then be a boolean. We give it this type over here when we define the errors object. Const errors equals post error, not equals colon post error singular. My apologies. And we also want to make sure that we have another three guard clauses in here. So the invariants that we saw earlier in the other files, let's also do import invariant from tiny invariant. And I noticed that my quotes, single double quotes, are all over the place. It's not a beauty contest. I wouldn't worry too much. So before we create the post, we want to make sure invariant, is the type of the title, is that a string? And same for 1, 2, 3 for the slug and markdown. Have those at guard clauses, so it won't complain, because this now fulfills, like if it gets here, then all of these three are strings. And we know that this is a full post object of the new post type, right? Because in new post everything is a string, nothing is optional. Yeah, that's how those I think are wired up. Now to try out one more neat thing in here, we're gonna introduce an artificial delay. When we submit the form, remember this happens server side. On the server we submit the form, the server is gonna do something, and then we can react to it. This is all local, it doesn't do a lot. It's gonna happen very quickly. So let's pretend it doesn't. Let's await new promise. Res set timeout with res, and let's introduce an art. Let's just make this function wait for a second, just a second, to see if something happens, because there are built in to Remix are loader states. So we don't need to make sure, we don't need to keep track ourselves. Did we submit the form? Did the form come back? Is the form pristine, so untouched? Not sure what the values are that they have, but they know at least, are we submitting right now? Or did we just submit? And they're keeping track of those states for us. There's use action data, there's also use transition. And same as we use the action data, const transition equals use transition. And we can change the text of the submit button with, and this is super neat, transition dot submission if it is currently submitting. If the transition is we are in the process of a submission, the button will say creating. If it is not, the button will say create post. Let's try to create a new post. What we're going to see first is the transition. So it's going to wait. The button says creating. Now it says create post again. And on here we see title is required, slug is required. Let's give it a title, hello world. Let's create the post. The button will be, because we're in submission, this is during a submission, we'll say creating. It will try to create, it will fail. And I get these two warnings. Post.slug, hello-world. We can have this, that's what they say here. We could have a helper function that automatically slugifies the title, because we usually want the slug of the post to be the title in all lowercase and separated with dashes. And markdown, let's just say this is crazy. Let's add some markdown here, create the post. And what happened now? It did not run into any errors. It created a post, and afterwards it redirected us back to /admin. And I have a new post. If I click on it, I get this file that was just created. On my file system, in my posts directory, there is now a file called helloworld.md that has all the content that we put in there just now. And we could take this further. Like if we are back to the admin interface, we could say clicking on one of the posts here. Right now it takes us back to the full proper post. We could say instead, get me to a page that lets me edit this post. So if we go to admin right now, we link to the /post slug. Let's instead say it should link to post slug instead. So no, if we don't give it a slash, if we don't give it a full path, the URL will be, it's super tiny in the bottom here, say admin /90s mixtape. This page doesn't exist. We can add it. So in the admin, we are going to add the what do we call it? The sub route? The nested route, probably, of, come here, new file, $slug tsx, export default function post slug, and return a div with the h1 of title. Let's reload that. So on the admin interface, /admin, we have created a new post. If we click on a post over here, we see the URL change to hello world, to 90s mixtape, to my first post. And this over here would change. Let's actually, to confirm that, use the export function loader again. And we had that earlier, where it gets the params, and it returns the params.slug. Const slug is use loader data. And here we're gonna say slug, just put the slug. Loader, what did I, okay. Export const loader, no, what seems to be the problem, officer? See, that's what happens when you don't really experiment with it before. What was the export? Export const loader. Yeah, of course, this is an arrow function. We're not going to do the invariant. We're not going to do the check now. Export const loader, we can make it async. We can make TypeScript not complain by saying you are a loader function. No import you like. So import type from remix. So it now says my first post, 90s mixtape, hello world, my first post. And now we could add another form in here, pre-fill the form, have another action on the form that updates the files on the file system even. I think I'd do that by replacing them probably. For a CMS-based solution, this would be using their API. And that already shows us, though, a lot of stuff that we can do with Remix. And a lot comes baked in. We don't need to worry about like giving it all the paths of the post that we wanted to create, because it doesn't create a lot of static files. Everything happens fast, happens very quickly, but happens when it's requested, unless of course you cache it and have a lot of stuff on that. We see that actions and submitting forms, that happens out of the box. If there is an action function called action, that will be called when the form of this component is submitted. Right now we put a lot of that stuff into a helper function, but we could use all the regular functions and methods in that loader directly. We could talk to APIs there. We can use the form data with the request.form data to read all the values from the input fields, do something with that. We can redirect from there. We can automatically have the transitions in there and so much more. This was a first teaser of what we can do with Remix, and I'm not gonna say that I'm gonna jump ship immediately, but this quick tutorial was enough to at least make me curious. I want to see how a medium-sized application would work with that. The API is stable, they say. I mean, this was made public not too long ago. They are actively working on it. The API is gonna stay like that. That doesn't mean that there aren't any bugs in there. Not sure if I would build an entire company around that, but for something to look at, like, this has made me very curious now. For one of the next sessions, I could see myself take one of my projects and move that over to Remix potentially. Right now, I must admit, I saw a lot of hype around it, but I really like what I see. If there's something that you'd like me to explore further, send me a message on the Twitters, or I think on Twitch. I think you can send me a message on Twitch. If you're watching this on YouTube, hi, this stream happened live a few days ago or weeks ago. If you're from the future, hi, are we still in the pandemic? So if you want to watch this live, I'm gonna continue with either this or a similar topic next Tuesday, same time. So I want to stream regularly on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 10 p.m. Central European time, which is 4 p.m. Eastern time, I think. So American Eastern time. I have a list of topics that I want to explore further, and I want to find the right format that works. Last time I explored, I tried to learn TypeScript on air, which worked kind of so-so. It was excellent that I got the support, that I was able to actually, that you were able to watch me learn. But I think this kind of format where I know at least some of what I'm doing and I can walk you through it a bit faster, that might be a bit more entertaining. Let me know if that works or if that doesn't. Happy to experiment a bit. Otherwise, I'd say I'm gonna cut it here, and I am going to let all of that sink in. I think it's worth a look. So if you do something with it, if you have any cool sources that I should check out, let me know. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you, well, next week, actually. I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.